So, here we go. We are back on this fine Friday, going for a Wood Elf Mirror, playing with a Rush build, some Loic's Blessing shenanigans. We're going to throw that down onto our cavalry, advance them as quickly as possible, and then hopefully overwhelm the forces of Hadri's. Our Lord is going to be advancing, and we'll be diving in towards the Dryads as quickly as we can. Our archers are going to start focus firing the Glade Guard. Our cavalry are going to try sneaking around too. The Hadri's doesn't see my cavalry coming in. They're stealthed for one more second, and there we go. My Wild Riders have revealed themselves. And they'll be able to slam into the Wood Elf lines fairly quickly. Should do a lot of damage. There's some Glade Riders here in the back, but they're going to get taken out by my cavalry, I think. We'll have to see how that plays out. As for the frontline fight, it's not going amazingly for me. It's also not terrible at the same time. We'll start pulling in with our cavalry to support. Throw down a few AoEs just to slow down all these archers. And then hopefully this fight on the right-hand side goes well for us. Our Sylvan Knights can do fairly well. They are only up against Glade Riders, but there's a lot of archers here that we actually have to contend with. In fact, there's a lot of Glade Riders, but this should still go fairly decently for us. As for the frontline fight, it is going okay, not amazing. The balance of power is shifting in the favor of Hadri's, so the Sylvan Knights are still doing great. They'll be able to bounce into the back line and start hitting up these archers. My Lord is getting caught up by Drycha. She'll have to retreat from that. She does have the mobility though, so that's not the absolute worst situation. As for the Sylvan Knights, very important that they continue pushing into the back line, but they're taking a lot of damage from those archers, and that will probably seal my fate with my Sylvan Knights now falling. And what do we have left? We do have our own archers still alive. Some of our cavalry will be able to recover, and we can start kiting out some of these Dryads and just essentially trying to regroup our forces here. I do have a unit of Wild Riders that can come in too. And in the meantime, I'm going to see if my Way Watchers can actually help carry out the day here. They do have pretty good range. They'll be able to pressure those Glade Guard. But, oh boy, we don't have too much cavalry, and there are still many Glade Guard troops left. But could still pull it back together. Our ranged firepower will do good. It really just depends on how much cavalry actually recovers. Looks like the Sylvan Knights are completely gone, and that's gonna be a quick GG. Oh man, I think just the counter charge from Hadri's really hurt my cavalry a lot harder than I would have expected, and a pretty quick game. In the end, it came down to the cavalry micro. I couldn't shut down his Glade Guard, and my stealth tricks did not pay off. If I had cycle charged the Dryad frontline, things could have gone a bit differently. Alternatively, I could have tried kiting after we loaded in and used my archers to pressure the Dryads. Since I did have that range advantage, my Way Watchers could have done a bit better there. But lessons for next time. Let's go ahead and save that game and move on to the next one. So this next game against Hadri's is going to be Skaven against Tomb Kings. We brought a classic gun build, optimized for killing off massive amounts of infantry, and a ton of Jezzails to shoot out any single entities. The front line for Hadri's consists of just a bunch of skeleton warriors. That's not especially scary, as we should be able to simply melt them down with our warp fire throwers and poison wind globadiers. A little bit of dodging goes a long way too, to dodge some of the screaming skull catapult shots. The Tomb Scorpion has revealed itself along the flanks, but I'm not particularly worried about it. We have rattling guns that can snipe it out. The bigger worry is all these skeleton horse archers, but they're not especially scary either, as we will turn our Jezzails to fire in on top of them. And we're going to be getting the frontline engagement underway as quickly as we can. Just moving up with our weapon teams to start sniping out the infantry. Got the dreaded 13th spell too that we can throw down on top of the what's it? Screaming Skull catapults. And then we should be good. Rattling guns will turn so that they may fire onto these priority targets, like Cetra the Imperishable. We want to be taking him down. And then we should be good as long as we don't get overwhelmed by all of these archers. Our Eshin Triads, and throw down a summon to stop the to stop some of the monstrous troops for the Tomb Kings, etc. You should be taking a pretty nice amount of damage, but there are a lot of single entities for the Tomb Kings, so that's going to worry me a tiny bit. There's a lot of skeleton horsemen. We want to make sure that we actually finish them off here. As for our triads, they can move into support, and our warp fire throwers can move in too, as long as we're done with this infantry line for Hadries. Just moving up our weapon teams to melt them down. And there we go, we've also managed to catch a lot of these horsemen. So that's definitely quite good. There's still a Tomb Scorpion coming into the mix though, that I will have to find a way to deal with. But we still have many of our guns operational. They're able to kill off many of the single entities, but the Ushopti summon has gone down. We're going to run away with our Jezzails to try and find a safer position. And in the meantime, our Screaming Bell is going to be doing its best to try and clear out this infantry. We'll even throw down a summon, try and achieve that. And that will free up some of our warp fire throwers at the very least. Cetra, though, will be able to dodge many of my shots. That's going to be a little bit annoying. He may actually pose a pretty big threat here, depending on how many guns we have by the end of the game. Nevertheless, the skeleton horsemen are basically all gone now. And it's just a few single entities left for the Tomb Kings. And what that means for us is that they can't easily dive into all of my ranged troops, and we'll be able to pick them off with the rattling guns, as long as we actually have enough available to snipe out these targets, which might not always be possible. The Screaming Bell will have to perform rather well here too. So this game is definitely not over, despite the balance of power being pretty in our favor. So let's get the warp fire throwers. We'll focus fire Cetra with that. These warp fire throwers will hit up the skeleton warriors, and I guess our triads are going to try and deal with Cetra. We'll block him up with the triad summon, and then we'll bring them over to hit up the Tomb Scorpion. In the meantime, we'll get our guns into a defensive formation here with many Skaven slaves, and then hopefully they'll be able to start shooting down Cetra. This Tomb Prince too, chasing off some of my gun units. Hadries definitely knows where the win conditions are. Going to be hitting some pretty important units, specifically my guns, and making sure that they're actually not able to kill off many of these targets. The Screaming Skull catapult is coming back too, but I have a unit of Globadiers moving in to go ahead and deal with that, so that won't be nearly as much of a problem. Some skeleton warriors in the distance should crumble away eventually. And we do finally have our guns operational, though they are getting mucked up by some of our Skaven slaves. That's actually going to be a tiny bit of a problem, but not the worst case scenario. The warp fires coming in too, we're going to have them, I guess, target that Tomb Prince. Cetra is going to be trying to dive through my Skaven slaves to try and lock down my weapon teams. It looks like he may very well be able to do that, but not before taking some good damage on the approach. The warp fire throwers, they actually do pretty nice damage. Yeah, warp fire throwers actually do pretty good damage against single entities, as long as they can actually get their hits off. Screaming Skull catapult should be off the field in just a second. We still have a few of our triads too, and we really just need to shut down Tomb Scorpion, I guess. Cetra too, going to be a priority target to actually shut down, and we'll try to do that with our Jezzails. Just focus firing him, same with the rattling guns, and the extra slow on top of him will be quite good. He can't heal, but there's still a lot of threats here. Specifically, the single entities are going to be a little bit of a pain. And man, do I wish I had something like Snickage in this situation, but what can you do? You can continue to throw down summons to try and keep our guys alive. And we can probably kill off this Tomb Scorpion with the Triads if we perform well enough, but that's definitely no guarantee. A lot of our forces are actually routing off now, and it seems like the single entities for Hadries are probably going to win out the day. We'll see though. In the late game, we do have the dreaded 13th spell, and we can use that to pretty good effect. Just summoning halberds on top of all these single entities, hopefully doing quite well. Tomb Scorpion is charging onto my Warp Fire Throwers. Hopefully they can get a few shots off before it charges in, but sadly they do not. And it looks like it's going to come down to just a Screaming Bell, essentially, and how well it can actually kill off single entities here. It is just a bunch of chariots, so the Screaming Bell is it's still competent here, but the Tomb Scorpion is going to be a little bit of a problem. Cycle charging from Cetra 2 is not going to be great, but the Triads are here to support. Only problem is though that we've now gone our troops rampaged. The Tomb Prince actually throwing down the rampage effect due to his low HP is able to trigger it. But as soon as that's done, we'll be able to summon up some of our Storm Vermin with the dreaded 13th spell. And we might not have to even do that yet. We'll hold on that until we really need it. Some Warp Fire Throwers too are here and ready, but they may get routed off. And we can't really throw down the dreaded 13th until there's nothing left for Hadries to disengage to chase off against. But our Lord is getting low, and there we go. He actually gets routed off. The single entities of the Tomb Kings pulling out the day, disrupting my backline, and Hadries showing some good target prioritization. I think we definitely still had a chance, but I might have over focus fired on these skeleton horse archers. They weren't especially scary, and if I were to play this again, I would probably have my guns more grouped together to focus fire all these chariot units. Alternatively, I could have gone for a hero squad like Snickage and an assassin. That might have actually worked out really well too. They're just really great at sniping out these single entities. And after that, it would have been a pretty clean win, since the infantry and cavalry weren't really able to pay for themselves. But there we go, a 2-0 victory for Hadries. And we'll be moving on to the next best of 3 now. So it's the next best of 3 now up against Mythal. Playing as the Bretonians, he has brought the classic Fey Enchantress Paladin hero squad, has a bunch of infantry, a few archers, and a ton of cavalry. Basically as classic Bretonia as you can get. And we're going to start off to see if we can get some snipes on the Fey Enchantress. The cavalry doesn't scare me too much, as long as we can actually catch out some, as long as our Warp Fire Throwers can actually catch them. And that might not always be the case. An initial engagement onto the Paladin is looking decent. Going to throw down our debuffs here and see if Snickage can actually get an easy snipe. In the meantime, we're going to move in our Warp Fire Throwers, start clearing out the Bretonian front line, and then we're going to pull back with Snickage. He wasn't able to snipe out the Paladin. That's sort of a shame, but we're still doing fairly well. The cavalry hasn't actually gotten to flank my troops yet, which is really good, since as soon as these peasants are actually routed off, we should have a pretty easy time dealing with the forces of the cavalry, since we do have so many guns ready to fire, and we can even use the Brood Horror also to assist in that situation. As for the peasant archers, we can rather easily push them back with our weapon teams and wolf rats, and that's going to be the plan. Some Knights of the Realm are actually moving into the back line to try and assist, but the Doesn't look like they'll be able to make it in time. They should be eating a lot of warp fire damage in just a second, as soon as our guns are able to point and fire at them. Meanwhile, on the right flank, we're doing really well with the terror of the Brood Horror, and the Hero Squad can't really do much with Deathmaster Snicketch around. Although we don't have any snares right now, we'll have to be a little bit careful to make sure that they don't run into too much heat. As for the cavalry, they will be dancing around just a tiny bit, trying to engage onto the front line. But we have the weapon teams at the ready. They're going to get slowed down and probably chased off in just a second. Some more cavalry. Coming in on the right-hand side, we do have our guns available to turn and fire onto them, so that's not too much of a worry either. It seems like the Bretonnians sort of coming in a little bit slowly, actually giving us many opportunities for our guns to take them out. But the biggest threat coming in now, the Pegasus Knights, going to be flying in, and they could just dive in right on top of my guns. Looking like their shields are actually preventing a lot of the damage. We'll see how well they actually do in this situation, especially since we do have our triads at the ready. Although a little bit lagging behind, they might be able to pin down those Pegasus Knights, and if they do, that will help us out a ton. Some of our Rattling guns too are available, and we want them to be shooting as much as possible, so we'll turn them onto the Pegasus Knights. And in the meantime, the Bretonnian Hero Squad coming in, we're going to have to try and save our caster. Essentially just trying to throw down our summons as much as we can, and using that to shield for the caster, while Snicketch comes in to kill off this paladin, who should actually be going down in just a second. We'll snare him, and then dive in right on top, and he should be going down fairly easily. As for our Brood Horror, we actually sort of forgot about it, and we'll be bringing it in to kill off the single entities too. It will have a little bit of a bad matchup versus the Pegasus Knights, but we've actually killed so much of them at this point that it shouldn't be too much of a worry. And there we go. The Brood Horror does make it onto the Paladin, and with a few good attacks, that should be the Paladin gone. As for the Pegasus Knights, looks like they will be able to shut down some of my gun units, but not the worst situation either, as they will be getting gunned down on the approach. Actually trying to dodge it, a little bit of a misplay since the Rattling guns actually fire so quickly. And that should be the end of those Pegasus Knights. So next up, it's going to be the Fey Enchantress. We'll send in the Brood Horror directly towards her, and we'll see if we can actually kill her now. She does manage to rout off my caster, but learning from our mistakes of the last game, having our hero squad, or at least hero killing squad here, is going to be carrying out the game here. The Fey Enchantress and double Paladin would have been a pretty big problem for our guns. Now that they're actually shut down, it looks like it should be a pretty clean victory. Can chase her down with the Brood Horror, but it's a bit of a risky situation. The Brood Horror could actually get killed off by these Pegasus Knights. We definitely don't want that to happen. So we're going to bring it closer to Snicketch to actually try and save it. As for the Bretonnian peasantry, we've managed to chase them off with our anti-infantry troops. We just had a ton of them, and they can freely keep all of these archers and peasant mobs back. Our Rattling guns are rallying too, which is sort of the one of the secret strengths of this build, is that your weapon teams will just keep coming back and causing problems. And now that there aren't too many actual troops left for the Bretonnians, I think we are in a fairly good position. Snicketch can simply move up and chase down the Fey Enchantress. Then we should be good to go, but it was still a rather close game nonetheless. And I think if the engagements had been timed better with the Bretonnians, it would have been a little bit worrying. But we're doing just fine. We've caught the Pegasus Knights. They might even land again onto these Skaven slaves, and that would definitely seal the fate of the Bretonnians. Looks like they're being microed to pull back, however, and they should be able to escape. But not before we get a little bit of extra damage and actually pick off a few models. And now we're heading into the very late stages of the game. Antonia is trying to regroup, but our hero squad is going to be a very difficult army to take down. There are, let's see, 2 units of Pegasus Knights left that will be able to heal up, but we're also regenerating with the Brood Horror. So that should be fine. Some peasant archers too in the distance will be coming in to try and take out my forces, but they aren't too numerous. We can even chase them off with the wolf rats if we really wanted to, and then we can snipe out the heroes with our single entities. That's going to be the plan. Let's move in with the wolf rats to try and do that. Nikich, he's going to be moving in with the assassin, stealthing up, and he's going to dive straight for that Fey Enchantress. They do dive in onto the Brood Horror to get some pretty nice damage, but we can now lock down the Fey Enchantress, surround her with Ashen Triads, and then that should be it, although we have taken a lot of damage with the Brood Horror, and this could actually go pretty badly in our favor, especially because we're getting charged in the back. My leadership could break here, so we'll have to be a little bit careful. Snickage 2 is actually taking a lot of damage. Brood Horror is routing. I think I might have played too aggressively here with these forces. We'll actually pull them back just a tiny bit, throw in some fresh troops with our summons, and then we should be doing a lot better. Some nice hits too onto the Fey Enchantress will be quite useful. And let's see, our Brood Horror is back too, so that should work out pretty well. So more AoE does come down, but the Fey Enchantress is now extremely low. We did almost lose Snickage though, so that actually almost went very badly for me, just taking a very foolhardy engagement. But it didn't matter in the end. We just barely managed to pull through with our crazy gun build. Although that was pretty scary. The Pegasus Knights were actually really hard to kill, and this build does suffer against monstrous infantry and flyers, so it's not a huge surprise that the Pegasus Knights were pretty scary. If it was just a ground knight build, the Warpfire Throwers would have been able to melt them down. As we saw, many of the cavalry units could quite easily get shut down, and if there had been more peasant archers or poison wind mortars, or the threat of poison wind mortars sort of make archers a little bit scary to go for. But nevertheless, a really nice game. Near comeback too from the Bretonnians, but we just barely pulled through. Here we go. The second game against Mythal. We have won the first game as Skaven, and we're up against the Greenskins now as the Wood Elves. Generally a matchup that I ban out, but mostly because I'm just inexperienced with it. Even though I have heard that it can be a pretty bad matchup, it's something that I should get some experience in. So our build has brought some Blade Singers and 3 Glade Guard to secure a pretty solid frontline fight. You can kill off any Black Orcs, any Stone Trolls, and shoot down any infantry for the Greenskins. And given that our front line is actually quite strong here, that should work out fairly well. Goblin Wolf Riders aren't too much of a threat, so we're fine bringing in the Sisters of Twilight to dive in on top of them. And then our Glade Guard are going to be just dancing around, poking, and getting in as much damage as they can. Some sniping looks to be heading down onto the Sisters of Twilight. My Blade Singers are getting a bit ahead of themselves. We want to pull them back, because these goblin archers can actually poke them for quite a bit of damage. You definitely don't want that, as they are some of my most expensive infantry troops. Sisters of Twilight are actually taking quite a bit of damage too from these skirmishers, and even though they do have healing, we don't want to be giving the Greenskins any free damage on top of them. So as much skirmishing as possible to keep them safe. And now I'm going to start bringing in our Sylvan Knights. They're going to be trying to dive in onto... honestly, I'm not sure exactly. But they might want to fight up against these Boar Boys. I don't think the Greenskins have too much magic damage at hand. So that should work out fairly well. The Blade Singers are going to move back until the archers are actually done and killed. And the Sisters of Twilight are actually taking a lot of Goblin Archer fire. But we can heal them up, and their passive should be able to proc. Just a second. Nice Pendulum works out fairly well in our favor. The frontline fight has begun. Sylvan Knights are ready to dive in onto the cavalry, so they're going to go ahead and do that. The Sisters of Twilight are going to, I guess look for targets to snipe out. We'll go for the river. Nah, we're gonna go for the Goblin Big Boss, since the River Troll Hag can actually be a little bit of a problem. He does have regeneration, and that regen is pretty painful for actually for trying to snipe her, as it will take an extraordinarily long time. Some fanatics are going down on my infantry too, but we've managed to keep our Blade Singers fairly safe, so that should be fine. We've routed off quite a few of the cavalry too for the greenskins. As long as the Sisters of Twilight don't die, we should be good. But as I say that, a big rampage goes down on top of her, and she's going to be taking a ton of damage from these stone trolls. But she hasn't routed off yet. We will be able to throw down some healing on her in just a second, and then hopefully she can disengage and get into a safer position. In the meantime, the back line for the greenskins has been thoroughly ravaged, and our Blade Singers are still at very high HP. So they should be able to kill off any heroes for the greenskins. The Sylvan Knights too are still at insanely high HP too, as they have been receiving some healing, and they can begin helping. They can start helping to snipe out these heroes too. They're actually surprisingly effective against heroes, so that should go pretty well. And I don't think there are some fanatics that could come down, so I have to be a little bit wary of this situation. And to make sure that we don't take too much AoE, I'm going to pull my Glade Guard out of that blob to make sure that fanatics don't kill absolutely everything here. The Sisters of Twilight, looks like their healing proc, it might not have gone off yet by the looks of it, so we'll still have to be a bit careful with them, just using them to use up the rest of their ammunition before landing, since I definitely don't want them to die. That would pretty heavily sway things into the favor of the greenskins. The fanatics have actually done quite a bit of damage too to my troops, but our Blade Singers are still at fairly high HP, and I'm thinking I'll probably pull back my Sylvan Knights to get them into a little bit of a safer position. I sort of want to go into a more conservative style of play now. Try and make sure that I don't lose too many important units here. Sisters of Twilight also are taking a lot of damage. They don't have their healing proc coming down. They may actually die, but they do just barely manage to escape here, along with the Sylvan Knights, and we're going to group them up with our Branch Wraith to receive a nice heal on top of them. That should be able to keep them stable, and then they can, I guess, just snipe out this River Troll Hag to secure the victory. In the end, it'll just be the Goblin Big Boss, and given that he's at fairly low HP, the Sisters of Twilight will likely be able to snipe them out too. That's going to be the plan. Hopefully the River Troll Hag shatters here. Looks like they still have one more route in them before that happens, so instead we'll just chase them off, and then use our Sylvan Knights to stay back. We don't want them to take too much damage. We want to be maximizing our heals on top of them, so we'll just group them up with the Sisters of Twilight and save our healing for a more opportune time. Our archers are getting compromised, but that's not too much of a worry, as they have actually used up all of their ammunition, surprisingly enough. So we should be in a pretty good position, especially because of the Sylvan Knights and the fact that the River Troll Hag is nearly off the battlefield. And in fact, I think if we rout off this Goblin Big Boss, that will likely be the end of the greenskins here. There we go, he's gone. Stone Trolls are gone too. And We still even have a little bit of Winds of Magic. But it won't really matter. We push the greenskins into army losses, and it shall be GG. Pretty nice. Worked out fairly well in our favor. The Sisters of Twilight were pretty squishy, so I didn't really feel like they were amazing here. They didn't even pay for themselves. Instead, it was really the Sylvan Knights that pulled through. You do have to be a bit careful. Greenskin builds will usually have a lot of magic damage to try and counter them. But in this case, you can see without magic damage, they were really good. Blade Singers performed well, and so did my Glade Guard, so that's essentially all we really needed to do. In the face of a more aggressive build, we would need the Glade Guard to be more protected, and we'd be leaving cavalry in the back. But it worked out. I'm also really surprised that the Rock Lobber did basically no damage. I'm not sure what happened there. Maybe just some really unlucky shots, but anyways, we'll be heading on to the next best of 3 now. So here we go. We're up against Ice Power now with our Skaven weapon team build, training it up to see if we can use it effectively in a tournament type setting. We've gone very heavy on the anti-infantry here. It looks like that might work out just fine for us, as there isn't a lot of infantry for Ice Power, instead opting for some Bolt Throwers. Some Spirit Leeches, Overcast have gone down onto my Poison Wind Mortars, but that's not too much of a threat, as we do have a lot of other firepower that can come in here. Bolt Throwers will be sniping it out too, though. That's going to be a little bit of a problem. The shots from the Scourge Runner Chariots too will be able to get in a lot of damage, but our frontline fight should go fairly well. Now, here we go. We are able to Rattling Gun down a few of the chariots, getting in a lot of damage just to start off. And you know what? We're going to net down the forces of we're gonna net down the flyers now, and then we're going to begin gunning them down with our Rattling Guns. Marathi does miraculously manage to land. I'm not sure how she managed to pull that off, but at the very least we will be able to put in a lot of damage onto the Manticore. The chariots will be getting picked off by some of our forces, and that's not Marathi, that's a Malice Darkblade, so terribly mistaken by myself, but we are able to engage onto him now. Our Wolf Rats can clear up any cavalry issues, and the Manticore will be quickly going down. A Death Frenzy on our heroes too, going to make them very strong against Malice, and they should be able to take him out very soon. Looks like he does trigger his ability, so coming back into the fight could be quite the threat here, but we still have many Rattling Guns, and we can mostly avoid him with our heroes. As for the Manticore, it looks like that should be going down soon. And now that most of the cavalry is dead, our Wolf Rats can actually sneak into the back line. We're going to send them in there, chase off the remaining chariots, and then we don't really have to worry about the Dark Elf infantry too much. They're not especially threatening. The Wolf Rats are doing good. The chariots are a little bit of a problem, but Malice, he's caught up in a lot of heat over here, and he should actually be dying fairly quickly. Our right flank is now secure away from the chariots, but our Wolf Rats do get rampaged. That is a very bad situation for them, but not absolutely terrible, as they will be routing off and probably coming back, but that's definitely no guarantee. The caster is coming in here too. It looks like she's diving in onto my weapon teams, but not especially too much of a worry, since we do have Snicketch here to actually help out that situation. The Brood Horror will be able to rout off some of this infantry too. And as for all these Dread Spears, they're not a huge threat, as we do have so many actual we have so much Warp Fire and Poison Wind. They'll be routing off extremely easily. Even with their buff, not going to be enough, as we managed to pull out a victory against Ice Power's Dark Elves. A nice, fun Skaven game. Worked out fairly well to our advantage. I did have a little bit of a miss micro, and he was memeing a tiny bit with Malice Darkblade. Poor Malice got shut down very hard by Snicketch and the Assassin, both of them getting huge amounts of value. The Brood Horror was a really nice touch too, very important against the Scourge Runner Chariots, and of course our front line, as usual, usually pays for itself, just because they really melt down infantry. So there we go, essentially all we needed to do. And the Bolt Throwers didn't really do much thanks to our aggressive push. The next game against Ice Power, Bretonia against Wood Elves. We brought the standard Wood Elf build. I'm still trying to master it myself. It's a lot of Wild Riders, Cycle Charging Infantry, Deep Wood Scouts to fire away at the peasants, and then a ton of spears to make sure that the cavalry can't easily engage. We're going to move up and begin our skirmishing, moving in with our cavalry to try and cycle charge. And we'll be loosing some volleys into the unarmored peasant mobs and peasant archers. Ice Power will be able to dodge the shots though, at least a good amount of the damage. We'll have to be a little bit careful here. We're going to try and bait out these archers into firing so that the Deepwood Scouts can actually take them out. Some cycle charging from our cavalry should do good too. And looks like our strategy worked out okay, getting in a tiny bit of damage. These Bretonian archers continue to fire our Deepwood Scouts and punish them for that. And the more archers we actually kill off, the better here. So that's going to be the play. But actually controlling your cavalry well here is really important for slowing down the Bretonian front line. Cycle charging as much as you can, and making sure that things like Lewin don't cause too many problems. So another charge coming on in onto the peasants is going to stop the archers, and then a second volley coming in, looking like it does pretty good damage. In the midst of the chaos, we'll be able to continue our cycle charges, and so far things are looking pretty good. The Damsel of Life also overextending actually. That's into a pretty rough position, and so far we're trading pretty well. The fact that the Damsel took so much damage too, really nice, as it does actually put Ice Power in a bit of a scary situation. But now we're in a bit of a scary situation ourselves, as the frontline fight has begun. Deepwood Scouts are getting engaged on, and our cavalry is getting chased, but we have a ton of Azrai spears. They're going to be moving in, and then our Wild Riders can move in for the counter charge. See some pendulums and come in too. And not to mention, we also have our summons at the ready to shut down the cavalry, who's actually routing off fairly easily. And now it's going to be a nasty pendulum onto all this infantry, although I think hitting up the archers might have actually done better for us, but nevertheless we're still trading out fairly well, specifically against the cavalry, who's been taking a lot of damage. But we'll still have to be careful. Drycha is getting a bit surrounded here, but things are going okay. Lewin is still at pretty high HP, but our Deepwood Scouts are safe. Our cavalry is doing okay, not amazing. And we'll have another pendulum up in just a second. Our Deepwood Scouts are going to be continuing to focus fire the archers, as they are the main threat against my forces. And our cavalry, they are getting engaged on and caught up by the Knights of the Bretonians. But we have so many spears at the ready that we should be able to secure that fight fairly well. The Bretonian archers do rally, but a pendulum will be able to clear them out pretty well. And our Deepwood Scouts, they do get engaged on, but with a mass rout on the Bretonian Knights here, we'll pull back all of our cavalry to get a sweet counter charge onto this cavalry. That's the general idea of how to play out this Wood Elf build. But a Dwellers Below comes down, and my cavalry will be taking a lot of damage. They don't have any healing, and that's going to be one of the main problems that we run into here. But enough of them have survived, or it's not the worst case scenario. Our Deepwood Scouts have routed off, but we've killed off many Bretonians too. I guess it's really just Lewin that's going to be causing a few problems here. Actually coming in and putting in a bit of damage onto Drycha. We do have a lot of spears, to support, and some more pendulums too. So it's not terrible. Some of our cavalry should be able to come back also to kill off the Knights of the Realm. It looks like Lewin is going to be chasing my cavalry. We're going to stall for time by retreating with that cavalry and moving in with our forces here to stop the Bretonnians. Our spears will be trying to brace against the charge of the cavalry, doing the best they can, and hopefully taking out a few models here. Some nasty pendulums can come down too onto these men-at-arms. And Dreicha's in a little bit of a scary position with Lewin actually coming back. But the pendulum, it does do a lot of damage. Lewin will be getting bogged down by spears, and we can prevent any charges in the back fairly effectively. But peasant archers have rallied, and that's going to be a little bit of a problem. They are deadly effective against my everything. They'll be able to kill basically everything except for Dreicha. So the fact that I haven't been using my pendulums to clear them out is going to be a little bit of an issue. Some Pegasus Knights fly in too, but we have a Dryad summon to lock up all the cavalry here. So that's going to be a plus at least, but I think I misplayed a tiny bit not focusing those peasant archers with my pendulums. In the late game, they're going to be proving extremely useful here. And just firing in onto my Azrai spears is going to be a pain. We're going to give them their missile resist buff just to avoid as much damage as possible from the archers, and hopefully that is able to pull us out a victory for us. But Lewin is quite a beast. He's able to cycle charge Dreicha, but she's quite tanky herself, and she won't be going down without a fight. So surrounding Lewin now with our forces, and bringing out some of our spears to attempt to chase off the archers. Definitely not an optimal situation, and I really wish I had killed them off. This is actually pretty terrible. Nevertheless, Lewin getting caught up a tiny bit by our massive blob of spears is going to actually take a little bit of damage there. He'll have to disengage, and as long as we have enough spears left in the late game, it's not the absolute worst case scenario. Lewin will be charging in onto Dreicha once again though. We'll once again surround him with the infantry, but the cycle charging from the cavalry is going to be quite painful also. Nevertheless, our spears will be able to do a lot of damage here. Dreicha will hopefully land a few hits up against Lewin, and once we have another pendulum, we're going to clear out the rest of the archers. Hopefully not before it's too late though. We'll have to see how it plays out. We're going to turn off this ability on our Azrai spears so that they don't take too much damage from the cavalry. Lewin will be attempting to fly in again, but he'll be shooed away by most of our forces. So that works out fairly well. One more Winds of Magic too, until another pendulum. Going to be absolutely great heading up on into this late game situation. The archers are going to be firing, but there we go. We can throw down the pendulum, and that might save our butts in this game. Oh, but it gets cancelled by Lewin. That's pretty bad. The archers now able to dodge, but one of them dodges, the other takes a fat pendulum to the face, and they're going to be routing off. So suddenly, things looking not as bad in this late game situation, as it's just Lewin left against a bunch of infantry that he really doesn't want to be facing up against. There are 2 units of Royal Pegasus Knights getting pulled down by my archers, by my spears, that is. However, Lewin does manage to save them, but in general, things aren't looking the worst anymore. Especially since we do still have some Azrai spears. War Dancers will be very effective here. And if we can chase off these archers, there's only one of them left and they're almost about to rout. Once they are actually off the map, it's just a straight up fight against Lewin. And he will be heal capping soon. Dreicha is a fairly good combatant herself. So it could go okay for us, or he could terror out the rest of our forces. Regardless though, it's been a pretty fun game, and I think really the main thing I would focus in the future is to pendulum the archers. They are going to be my priority targets because they got way too much damage in the late game. So here we go, game now rounding out. We're going to bring in our forces. Try and take out the rest of these guys here. All of our troops are shielded, since we do have this passive ability on the Azrai Spears. It's just whether or not this force can kill off Lewin, especially with the poison arrow support. Not going to be the easiest task. He's going to come in and land, hitting Drycha, but getting caught a bit in the melee. We'll be able to hit him with the spears, but our war dancers are about to get routed off. Looks like a terror route might even do it. I'm not sure if they're immune to psychology, but it looks like they do just barely manage to keep it together. And Lewin, he's going to be diving in again onto Drycha, but as we know, the single entity fight can always go either way. He baits out a charge to buy time for the archers, but now there's nothing left to really stop, to really support here. There are men-at-arms, which are quite threatening, and it looks like that's all that's going to be needed as the charge comes in from Drycha. And the game ends off, but it was extremely close, and we very nearly pulled it through had it not been for my misplay. A quick peek will show that, as these guys have been able to pay for themselves. They were able to kill my Azrai Spears, and if they hadn't taken so much damage, they would have made even more value. They are extremely strong against Lewin, and yeah, very important. My cavalry too took a little bit of a beating. Could have microed them a little bit better, although I think this time around I did okay with them. They did get caught out though, 1 or 2 times, and reducing that is quite important, as they do provide mass to catch Lewin. They can chase off infantry no problem. So a few things to focus on, but not terrible, not terrible. 230 kills with Pendulum, that is correct. So for the final game against Ice Power in the ace match, we've brought Bretonia up against the forces of the Skaven. We have a pretty standard build, just going for Peasant Archers for DPS, Knights for flanking, and Battle Pilgrims to punch through the front line. For Ice Power, he doesn't have Snicketch, going for Throt and a Packmaster, and for his caster, they're going to be taking up the front. Plague Priest up against the forces of Bretonia. You will likely be throwing down a few summons here. Some Wolf Rats may be hiding too, but it doesn't look like they are too prevalent here. So not too much of a problem. And we can use the Fey Enchantress just to poke away at some Skaven slaves to start off with. Actually getting into a little bit of a dicey situation, but she can pull back no problem. And our archers can make sure that nothing terrible happens to our hero squad. Our cavalry is going to be moving in to get ready to begin cycle charging, and our archers are going to be battering in the front line while our pilgrims get into the fight. We'll be cycle charging these Skaven slave spears best as we can. And yeah, just trying to flank as much as possible. The rat ogres are defending the back line, so we can't really afford to dive in on that front. But hitting up the Skaven slave spears should work out pretty well. Fey Enchantress and Double Paladin will be a huge threat also to many of the forces here. And they can start playing pretty aggressively, diving in onto the back line. Our archers will be taking a lot of damage, but as long as we're expedient with our plays, that should be good. Plague Priest 2 is taking a lot of damage. We are losing a few of our cavalry units, but we're pushing through the front line now. The Plague Priest is very nearly dealt with, and our Knights of the Realm can now get brought into play, as they are rather important here. We're going to bring them in and pull away with the Fey Enchantress. She's going to continue to try and snipe out the Plague Priest, while our Paladins move in too. That is the magic gone for the Skaven, but we've taken a lot of damage from the mortars, and we'll have to try and remedy that situation as best as we can. Throt is going to have a rough time against the archers, so he'll have to disengage from this fight soon. And our Knights, they can't really engage these Poison Wind mortars. The rat ogres are coming in to support, and we don't want to be losing our Knights in that fight. As for our hero squad, they are doing absolutely fine, but our cavalry will have to be pretty careful with them. Let's take stock of them, pull them into some safer positions, and then hopefully they'll be able to help us out in the late game, as the Poison Wind Mortars aren't especially scary up against the forces of our cavalry. They'll instead be pulling back to defend our archers. They should be able to do that fairly well, charging into the Rat Ogres where they can, and hopefully taking out quite a few models. The Paladins will be doing the same. And our Peasants are going to try to sneak in through the back to kill off the Poison Wind Mortars. Might be a little bit too late to actually take that engagement, but hopefully they can get in there in time. As for these Rat Ogres, they are actually being quite the bit of a pain here. A little bit hard to take care of, but our Paladins are fairly effective against them. We have a bunch of Knights now streaming in to actually kill them off. And with a little bit of healing, hopefully our Knights are able to keep it together. If we can rout off these Rat Ogres, that will be a nice big play, since the Rat Ogres are going to be the main thing pinning down our hero squad, that and the double Brood Horror. They're actually still very resilient, though. I think they might have gotten some healing from Throt, and that's a bit of a worry. You can see my forces now buckling under the forces of the Skaven. Our hero squad is still quite proficient, though. They'll be able to eventually punch through these Rat Ogres no problem, especially with the cavalry support that we're now going to bring back into deep reserves, as we want them to live into the late game. That will be very, very important, and we're just not going to keep them engaged because I very much want to have them to fight off the remaining Skaven forces. So that's going to be the plan, just pulling them back into safety, using them to chase off units where they can, and just healing with the Fey Enchantress. Some more Knights over here are going to pull back into safety too. And this hero squad for the Skaven, they're going to be off in the distance, and we're going to be ignoring them for the most part. We don't want to really take a fight against them until much, much later, and instead we're just going to be using our cavalry to clear out many of the Skaven forces before we take that engagement. These Globadiers, though, have actually routed off a few of my cavalry units, and we want our Paladins to come in and support there to kill off these Globadiers before we lose all of our troops. The mortars are still able to fire too, and that might actually be the winning play for the Skaven. Let's throw down a heal to get this cavalry back up and healthy, regroup with our Paladins, and then hopefully win out the game this way. The double Paladin, Fey Enchantress are pretty effective here, and if we can rout off these Skaven troops, that's going to be what does it. So we're going to pull them together, focus onto Throt the Unclean, heal up our Paladin, and see how our hero squad does against the Skaven hero squad. We can throw down some buffs here too onto our Paladins, and their anti-large should prove rather effective. Not to mention, we also have the Peasant Archers, and Throt has taken a lot of damage. We can now effectively chase him off, and this could lead to a clean victory for us, but I'll still have to be very careful. This game is going to come down entirely onto the Fey Enchantress, really. Throt now healing up, actually pulling back into his spears is going to keep him safe, and there are still some Globadiers alive. I'm going to be trying to focus on killing them off, so that we can cycle charge with this cavalry. Our archers will be able to fire in too. And there we go, the Globadiers taking some damage. Hopefully we can get them to rout off, but if they don't, it's no real biggie. Throt is coming on into the Fey Enchantress, but the double Paladin is there. They'll be hitting him for a lot of damage, and focus firing him down is going to be imperative. Our Peasant Archers are going to move into support also. And let's see if we can actually kill him. It's pretty dicey, but not impossible. Let's see, it looks like he's even trying to escape here, by the looks of it, due to this, while we're examining the situation through the lag. So I guess we wait now. I guess we wait. Hopefully he doesn't DC, because this game was pretty close. And there we go. He doesn't DC. Throt does attempt to pull back, And instead of trying to chase into a bad situation, we're going to use the Fey Enchantress and just disengage. Her Mortis engine effect will be able to hurt these the rats, and our cavalry can continue picking off a few targets here since the poison wind mortars aren't really around to fire. This will leave our peasant archers alive, and then the peasant archers can continue to fight against the single entities. So that should work out fairly well. There we go. These clan rat spears now getting engaged upon by my cavalry forces. But will that be enough? These globadiers are getting scarily close. Same with the rat ogres. And honestly, the rat ogres could just end me here if I'm not careful enough. Not to mention the globadiers too are quite threatening. They do actually manage to get a volley off. It's pretty unfortunate for me. That will likely be the end of this cavalry force. So instead, I'm just going to send them in to get their final charge in onto the globadiers, trying to get as much damage as they can before the poison eventually kills them. Now there we go. We have routed off these globadiers, and now we're going to charge onto Throt with them. But he does pull away into the safety of the rat ogres, and that puts the Fey Enchantress in a pretty scary situation. Let's see. Fey Enchantress and double paladin against rat ogres. How do I feel about that? I'm not extremely confident there, but if we do manage to get a pick on Throt, that will be the win essentially. But one of my paladins does actually get caught up. Throt does get a bit ahead of himself though, and we're going to get to charge in onto him, getting in some pretty nice hits. We'll see if this actually works out. He pulls away to try and get into a safer position. We'll chase him with our paladins, and if our paladins die, that will likely be it, but they might be able to disengage fairly well here. However, Throt, he does dive in onto one of the paladins. He will get countercharged by the Fey Enchantress though. But there's a lot of Skaven support, and that could end the game here, as the first paladin does rout. The Throt, he's still taking a ton of damage. We're going to try and chase them to the best of our abilities, but these hero rat ogres in the late game are just going to pull it through. GG, well played to Ice Power. A close game, a very laggy one by the end of it, but there we go. He's going to barely pull it through. The globadiers actually really doing well in the late game. I wasn't able to shut them down. I could have tried collapsing in on top of them with my cavalry, but sadly I was not able to. The paladins and the Fey Enchantress too likely could have tried to snipe them out. I think it was a really nice pick of the Plague Priest. But let's see. How would I have wanted to play this differently? I think my peasant archers didn't really do as much as I would have wanted to. Instead, I could have gone for a flank overload onto the rat ogres also. My mobile forces might have actually been able to overpower the rat ogres, but it felt like it was a little bit of a difficult position for a lot of the game. Alternatively, I could have gone for trebuchets too, to hammer down this force and allow me to cycle charge, but it was close enough where I think just a little bit of cavalry micro still could have won it for me. So there we go. It's gonna be the end of today. I think it's fine. That's going to be the end of things for multiplayer for me today. I think Poison Wind is strong, but I don't think it's impossible to deal with. Even though we did lose the game there. Many players have figured out ways to beat Skaven, especially the Wood Elves too. And we're not seeing Skaven as a first pick all the times, so I'm still sort of holding out my hope. But they do definitely feel strong. Nevertheless, that is going to be the end of the multiplayer games for today. I'm going to switch on to some comfortable campaign, since I do have a faction, no, not a faction war, a clan war between ODM and another clan tomorrow. So I want to save my energy for that.